Can start.
Thank you, Sasha. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to wish you all happy Eid. Happy Friday. This is the end of the week and end of the month. So we have a very, very interesting session from people more from the Middle East region. And we're going to talk about VC insights in the Middle East, covering entertainment, gaming, and esports. By the way, myself is Sunny Mohanty. I'm the regional director of La Token. I'm based here in Singapore. I welcome you all to another episode of VCTV, the Venture Capital TV from La Token. As I said, today is a very special session, special day, and happy Eid again to our speakers. We have Miraj, Said, Jennifer, Somaksh, Andan, Karthik, and Amar. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, pleasure.
Hi. Welcome, all of you. So the format is I would like to ask you, each of you, to introduce yourself, about your company, what you're doing right now in the space. Then I can move to the questions. I'd like to start with Miraz first. Thank you.
My name is Miraj Sayed. I'm Regional Director for Sekhai Business, which is a company which focuses on helping other companies with a reputation online and helping them build a brand. We are working worldwide. It's a digital company.
Right.
So this whatever is happening in the world is good for us.
Okay, welcome,
and
Miraj.
Everything is moving online, which is a natural thing for us to do business with.
Okay, excellent. Welcome again to VCTV. So the next speaker I would like to ask for introduction is Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, I am Jennifer Arkhurst. I am a lawyer, UK trained lawyer, a solicitor, as we call it in the UK, and I'm managing partner of Arkhurst and Abdullah Solicitors in the UAE. My focus and specialization is corporate law, commercial law,
right,
mergers and acquisitions, and also helping startups find investors. The way we've pivoted is that we are soon going to be setting up our own online legal store because we find that a lot of the business owners that traditionally used to come to us for certain services are actually going online to look for those services simply because they can't afford traditional lawyers, and COVID-19 makes things much worse. There are other services as well that we're going to be introducing, such as coaching other lawyers, as well as other new services because of what we're facing at the moment.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. I mean, good to know about the online legal store. I would like to hear more from you later. Thank you. Welcome. The next speaker would be Somaksh. I'd like you to introduce yourself first and what are you doing in the space. Yes, thank you.
I'm Sumas Kandan Jayaraman, the executive advisor to the CEO and strategist of Home Express and Bank on Us. So we are essentially consultants who...
we can't hear you properly. A little louder, please.
So we are essentially consultants who enable companies enter India via acquisition or typically testing the waters. So we devise entry strategies. Now, what we are doing is entering the space of entertainment and gaming in the sense that we are looking for viable startups at early stage, which we could help mentor and take them to the next level in terms of exploding. So currently, we are looking at the e-gaming space, a disruptive game in India, in the card game. Card game space, and that's in India. And also we are looking at a script, hopefully looking to monetize it via a streaming platform like Netflix. So that's our involvement in the space.
Oh, wow, that sounds interesting. I'd like to know more about it. Thank you. So the next speaker I would like to introduce himself would be Amar Shubar. Hi, Amar. Welcome to VCTV. How are you today?
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. My name is Amar Shubar. I'm a partner with Management Partners. We are a management consulting firm focusing on the Middle East. We are also helping startups in terms of exploring basically as a market opportunities, and as well as basically doing some advice against equity. And the gaming esport activity, we are especially interested in virtual reality and augmented reality applications, where we see basically a number of movements and are trying basically to support startups who are basically developing esport activities on virtual reality, and now more and more on augmented reality, and basically blurring in basically sports applications, gaming activities or sports activities with basically a gamifying aspects in terms of basically overlaying that with augmented reality and applications.
Excellent. That's very interesting space. We'd like to know more. Thank you. Welcome again, Amar.
Thanks.
Last but not least, we have Karthik again, back on the show. Hi, Karthik. How are you today?
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. So just to give you a background, I head Adventure Retail, which is Sharaf Group's adventure outdoor business. Along with being a retailer, I also help a lot of startups raise Seed A, Seed B funding, and I help a lot of venture capitalists in terms of evaluating businesses. Disclaimer is I have certain interest in entertainment space, which I will be talking about, and evaluating one gaming opportunity from Bahrain, which is where all the activity is happening at the moment. Certain confidentiality, but I would be able to throw some insights on whatever is possible. So that's my interest in this space.
Yeah, great. We would like to know, because absolutely I don't have any clues what's happening in the region, but good to hear from you. Thank you. Okay, so my first question would be, what are the recent investments into entertainment, gaming, and esports, or any merger and acquisition in the space that happened recently because of the COVID-19? Can I ask Miraj to take this question first?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I didn't hear you that well.
Okay, so what are the recent investments into the space, entertainment, gaming, and esports, that you are aware of and that happened during the pandemic?
What I focus on, like I told you earlier, I've been a gamer myself, and we have also built gaming platforms before. The recent investment that we have seen is more of in the gamers, pro gamers themselves, that we have seen, because that's what we focus on, since we help pro gamers worldwide to promote them, to gain more fans, more visibility, and more sponsorship. So I see a lot of movement online where sponsors and companies are trying to, it's like gamers nowadays, pro gamers are like sportsmen. They're celebrities, and a lot of companies wants to get a hold of them to sign them for different brands. That's the kind of investment we see in the gaming and esports. I don't know about the technical part, but this is what we have seen. And that's what we also do. We help to promote these esports games and pro gamers.
Okay, so is that specifically confined to Dubai or the Middle East region, or do you see that, I mean, because you are a global company, it's a digital space, so...
No, it's a worldwide thing.
Worldwide
it's thing. A worldwide, since there are millions and millions of gamers online, and people play from all parts of the world. We also see a lot of big companies starting to get a lot of, interest in these gamers and the games itself.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Miraj. Jennifer, I would like to know your insights about the same question.
Late last year, W Ventures announced a 50 million investment. They're the Dubai-based company. They announced a 50 million investment in esports. Esports is now backed by the government. And in terms of other GCC countries, Bahrain also announced that it will take steps to increase esports in the Gulf region by forming joint ventures with entertainment franchises. Saudi Arabia as well last year before COVID took steps to constructing esports venues with a view to nurturing esports enthusiasts and the young people that want to get into that space. But that is what I know. I don't know of any investments in the GCC region, or at least in the UAE during COVID-19. But the first ever esports female group was formed in March 2020. And we have one of the esports teams called Yala Esports that apparently got some funding. I think it was last year as well, a 6-figure funding, but that's as far as I know what's happening in the space.
Okay,
the governments are interested. It's still a very untapped industry. It's simply because of lack of support and also awareness, because basically there's the notion that compared to the US, China, and Korea, where you have esports is very popular, over here, the young folk are not likely to take it up professionally, because in the US, for example, you have esports athletes. Whereas in the Gulf region, I don't know whether it's perhaps due to cultural reasons, the youngsters are not likely to take it on board on that basis. They'll probably just do it part-time. But it's esports is a good opportunity for the telecom companies to get into it because of COVID-19. And a lot of people are still stuck at home. All the entertainment facilities and cinemas and theaters and so on are all shut. So we just have to watch this space and see what investments go into this industry.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jennifer. I think that brings my question to Karthik, who also mentioned about Bahrain. I mean, what's happening in that space? So Karthik, we'd like to hear, like, in continuation with what Jennifer said, government is putting a lot of...
I think we lost you.
Hello?
We lost you. I couldn't hear you. So you want to just... nevertheless...
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a perspective, see, with Hero Capital and Redbird raising around 250 million in 2019, is where this race for investments in the esports category began. Shapiro just about invested around 27 million. Hyos invested around 21-22 million in this space. As Jennifer rightly mentioned, there is a lot of investment coming in, and investments likely to pour in primarily due to COVID changing the way the industry is looked at. But it's still in very nascent and very early stages from a regulatory point of view, from a compliance point of view, from a payment gateway and payment clarity in wiring structure point of view. And more importantly, the following, I would take a very different approach to it. US, China, Japan, Korea, and maybe certain other Southeast Asian markets have built following towards it because the industry has evolved. It's taken them 8 to 12 years to reach particular level, where early investments happened anywhere between 2009-10, where bandwidth discrepancies were clear, telecom sectors were deregulated. We're still looking at Middle East, where bandwidth, telecom, compliance, payment gateway, and the industry itself is in a nascent state. So with COVID, obviously, it's going to get an exponential growth. I see that in next 3 to 4 years, primarily starting from Saudi, while Bahrain was a catalyst or an incubator for this because of the first 2 or 3 global tournaments happening in Bahrain. Global tournament happened last year as well with an incubate of 500,000 prize money. I think bigger following would happen in Saudi, the way YouTube and the way Snapchat following or the way internet consumption has increased in Saudi. I see this industry picking up rapidly in Saudi. More importantly, with investments now being pumped in by YouTube and pumped in by Google, and with certain opportunities created by Facebook for integrating platforms, I think we would see a robust growth starting with Saudi. And once it grows in Saudi with the kind of population, especially the middle-aged population that it has, the youth and middle-aged, it obviously is going to have a spiraling effect in UAE and maybe in Iraq, Oman, Iran as well. So
yeah,
that's where we see. But like Jennifer said, telecom regulations is going to be one. Second, I think bandwidth and internet accessibility, while urban UAE doesn't have a challenge on bandwidth and internet accessibility, certain other locations in the GCC still suffer from extremely poor bandwidth availability. So that is something that the industry will continuously have to evolve with. Change in lifestyle. Soccer took 15 years to become popular in this part of the world. And now is where soccer has become a predominant activity in the region. Internet sports or esports would take that much more time to become a part of lifestyle. It has to twine around people's lifestyle and not become an activity which is amateurish or an activity that just generates revenue. So yeah, I see next 4-5 years, with the kind of investments that we have on the table, I think there's going to be a lot of meat in this space, especially in internet activities or multiplayer gaming platforms or platforms which involve people from different geographical regions. Yes.
Great insights, especially from the Gulf region, because I think it's already a mature market, as you rightly said, in US, Korea, Japan, China. Thank you, Karthik. Sumakshanam, I would like to take your insights as well.
Sure. So in continuation with what Karthik, Miraj, and Jennifer just said, very good points indeed. Definitely, regulators are catching on to the developments in the industry. So that's the gap that we are witnessing in various parts of the world. However, saying that, again, it's a very optimistic space. We are absolutely bullish on the gaming space. Now, let me put forth some statistics. After 2020, the general market has slumped, right? However, the gaming ETF by VanEck has had a positive ROI. Moreover, after 2020, certain stocks like Netflix, the proof is in the pudding, where you see post 2020, they've been rising, whereas the market in general has been slumping. So saying that, I mean, it's also nice to note that the VC space though it has slowed down in general, there has been some activity in gaming. For example, Roto VR, a VR technology company in the UK, just raised an early investment of I think 1.5 or 1.7 million pounds. And there's also Gen G, which is another eSports company, which has attracted investments from the likes of Will Smith and a Japanese sports guy. Now, again, so what we can see is that typically when celebrities or funds with a very wide array of strategic investment preferences opt for a certain industry, it is an early indicator of the rate of growth of the industry. And the kind of scenario we're living in, it could very well be the strategy of the new normal, right? Because entertainment is very much within the four walls of your home, through your device. Smartphones are being, again, there's increase in smartphone purchasing. So everything fits beautifully for this industry to be a winner for this current or the next few decades.
Absolutely agree and good to know about those investments in the space. I myself is a high consumer of online entertainment as well. Thank you. Amar, we'd like to know your insights as well about the industry and the investments.
Thank you very much. I mean, overall, in terms of startup funding, we saw a declining trend actually already starting in the second half of 2019. And then obviously, through the first half of 2020, through COVID-19, a lot of investment has become very cash cautious. So we saw basically a significant decline in overall startup investment across all stages, as well as basically a cash crunch with existing investments. So a lot of the angel investors, a lot of the VC are actually concentrating their current basically investment into their already established startups rather than basically extending their portfolio, because their startups are currently in struggle, especially in across various areas where basically they have been affected by the lockdown and the COVID-19 impact. In terms of the VR and augmented reality space, we also see basically that the market has been affected, at least short term, given the overall context, but also since those applications are a little bit require more higher education space. So people need to see it. They are basically, the evaluation states for those games have been through location-based gaming centers, which are currently under lockdown, which basically will then promote the overall extension and then to the home use. So normally that's basically how the adoption cycle basically works. And that has been now also hit through COVID-19. While we are still looking on the overall market segment positive, we still see basically a slow development over the next 2 years due to the COVID-19 impact.
All right. Oh, good to know that perspective as well. Thank you, Amar. Thanks very much. So that brings me to the next question, which is very relevant to what Miraj's company and Miraj would be doing. So in terms of communication and marketing, what are the must-have for a successful fundraising process?
Are you asking me?
So, but yeah, in terms of communication and marketing, what do you think? If you were to advise a startup in the space in terms of marketing and communication, what do you think are the must-have? Because you deal with online content marketing. So, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, first of all, you need a good strategy as any company. You need to have a good plan for how to put your brand out there, to build your reputation. Reputation online, extremely important. Yeah, more important today than ever before. So, like I said, this is what we are experts in. We help companies to build their brand, build their reputation, so people trust them, and they can then move to the next stage, and they can gain more revenues. That is very important today, and it's going to be even more important in the future also.
All right. Okay, sure. Thank you. Jennifer, because you're from the law background, we'd like to know what are the legal, sort of areas that founders or the investors should be wary about before making any investments into this space. Are there any specific legal requirements or, in the region?
Well, in terms of the UAE, the investment laws are underdeveloped. And hence, whenever investors wish to develop in homegrown companies, they tend to set up offshore entities in order to do so, simply because the laws here are not robust enough to protect investors' funding. That's why it's that way. But in terms of the startups, from my observation, a lot of them seem to have disappeared into a black hole since COVID-19 started. For example, my firm had about 19 tech startups, which my firm had teamed up with investment bankers who have their own independent companies to help them. We had very good plans to help them, but since COVID-19, they have just all, they're not even communicating, which is not good for them, actually. As the other speaker said, they need to keep up with their marketing, putting themselves in the forefront, making their brand known and so forth in order to attract investors. But just burying your head in the sand doesn't really help. But in terms of protecting, in fact, I think right now most investors will be reluctant to invest in startups, tech startups. They'll probably go for companies that are already up and running and have got some traction because it's less stress for them. So from a legal perspective, that's all I'll have to say on the subject for the moment, unless
Sure.
the other speakers have got something to add.
Yeah, thank you. Because obviously you're from the area, so I just thought of asking you that quick question. Thank you, Jennifer, for your insights. So, Makshan, I've got a different question for you. So, what should the startups be doing? Like, now that they've learned the lesson during COVID-19, as Jennifer said, they're hibernating. Which is not a good idea, right? So, just hypothetically speaking, if everything goes well and we are back to the old normal, so what should be they doing to build a sustainable business, scale, and attract the needed investment?
Good question. And also Jennifer's, I also like Jennifer's personal message to her portfolio of companies founders, because definitely not communicating efficiently and promptly has more than a immediate damage to your rapport. It has a longer reputational damage to the founder and the company itself. So what I feel is, look, firstly, for any early stage investment, I think when I look at an early stage concept or a startup, the team, the collusion between the team, how cool the team is, how motivated and driven they are, how much hustle and grind is involved in their everyday, at work, and how much of expertise they have. So let me put it in that order. It's attitude first, expertise, hard skills definitely are super important, but the will to make things happen, because we all know that startups are ruled by a very thin success rate, and that's so the confidence that an investor gets is only if the team shows that they could really surpass through all the challenges that they could encounter, because startups need to keep pivoting every now and then. It has to be more agile than agile. You got to do rapid testing and with very low resources. So definitely the team, definitely a solid strategy like Miraj, a good like Miraj mentioned, a good 1 year short-term plan. 3-year plans, we could chart out 6-year plans, but in this space, because the space is so rapidly evolving, we need a concrete 1-year plan, which has all the kinks, all the questions, all the possible uncertainties, all the possible opportunities, threats answered, along with a very good deep dive on the technology, a piece-to-piece workflow as to how the game operates. So I think with a solid framework, with a solid business plan and a good team that's backing them up, hopefully they should be able to sustain the shocks of COVID.
Thank you. And also because COVID would have taught them a lot of lessons, Thank you, Smak. So, okay, I would like to ask Amar a very investment-related question. Before January 2020 and after January 2020, what has changed in terms of institutional and private equity investments in the region?
So I think in general, investment has been more cautious. There's a lot of basically cash constraints right now. You see that basically across all the industries, and that has affected investors as well. Plus basically risk profile for all companies and especially startups has increased significantly. So that's basically why investors has been very, very cautious and investment level has been decreased. Saying that, I think on the other hand, you actually have now some good opportunities as well to dig in. And so I think wherever there's a crisis, there are basically challenges and opportunities. And the opportunities lies in that you might basically, one, find now startups who actually are ideally positioned to help in some of the, let's say, emergent aspect of COVID-19 in order to help social distancing. So basically all aspects which basically can transform digital interaction with customers are basically now much more in a better position to push their products. And I mean, we have seen that with the video conferencing tools, but you see that basically across all the space, be it in terms of food delivery, be it in terms of restaurants interactions, etc., where you basically, if you have an application which helps basically social distancing and basically to continue current businesses with the pivoting, that's actually is now the right time to actually increase the investment. And that's where basically you see then focal points where they're pushing it, be it marketplaces, be it things which basically reduce the physical interactions. At the same time, I think from an startup perspective, there are two things basically startups should now really focus on. Is one, to consider basically how can they pivot their products to utilize basically the COVID-19 implications. So we have invested, for example, in startups related to tourism and hospitality, which basically has been heavily affected by that, but they basically pivot the model in terms of supporting hospitality industries to basically better educate, provide better information related to COVID-19 and countermeasure effects by hospitalities, and has been basically therefore recognized as one of the healing solutions in the industry. So again, even if you're in a difficult industry, you might basically think about how can you utilize the crisis. The second part, I think it's crucial, is basically for startups to really strengthen their relationship with the investors. It's now more important than ever before to have basically a clear funding strategy and basically the required support, because we all have to go through a dry period for the next 2 to 3 years. And especially basically startups in the early stage, which don't have a cash flow in order to maintain, it's critical basically to already secure the second and third round of funding in that situation. So that I think is important. The third aspect was that, given let's say point 2 has been fulfilled, is that currently it's actually a great opportunity to buy in talents for a good price. You basically have a lot of talents right now who are looking for new opportunities and challenges, being basically in the industries who just lost their job or basically other startups. And right now is basically, if you have enough deep pockets, and that's why basically having a strength with your investors, you are able basically to very quickly get the right talents, increase your presence in the market and push forward. So I think for startups, rather, I agree with my co-panelists. I think the startup should not go in hibernation mode. It will not help them. I think it's more, right now, it's more important than ever, basically the fight forward, which is basically securing funding. That's critical. But with that funding, best utilize it right now to push forward and basically invest aggressively in talent acquisition and getting the right people on board.
Well, Amar, I'm like really, you've answered all the questions that I had for the session in one question. Thank you. Thanks for that. Karthik, I would like to ask you a slightly different question. So basically, the investment process obviously has changed. It's different. So specifically to the esports and gaming industry, so if you had a startup with no traction and between a startup which is obviously has done a pre-seed round and has traction and scaled up. So do you think that the startup with no traction has no chances of getting any funding? Because previously probably they had a chance, but not now?
I don't think so. The industry is in such a nascent stage that today everybody would find a backer. One needs to go through a very clear fundamental process. Today, the catalyst is not just the esport as a game or an activity. The entire industry, the advertising industry, the telecom industry, the payment regulatory industry, as well as the social media community, gets benefited by an esport player growing in space. For example, the advertising community is out there to support the esports industry, primarily with 600 billion worth of revenue last year coming into developed markets only by advertising in esport. What Wes McLaren did to Formula One, or what Super Bowl has happened, is what is going to happen in the esports industry. So there would always be a particular trigger point or catalyst who will want the esport industry to go. So they would be sitting with funds. There are very strong telecom operators across the world who have seen stagflation growth, significant exponential growth in telecom consumption and bandwidth consumption because of esports. So they are sitting with funds available. Social media players, like I told you, YouTube and Facebook, are sitting with funds to promote this esports industry. Primarily strong technological presence, including AI and VR, acceptance of a game or acceptance of an activity relevant to a social and demographic and geographical relevance, and more importantly, its contemporary cutting-edge infrastructure is what is going to define whether a startup is going to get that kind of fund or not. Along with what the other panelists spoke about, passion, about having a right team, about having a right people on board, I think it's about a promise, it's about its acceptance, it's about the repeat that it's going to drive in, it's about the advertising revenue that it's going to drive in, and the ancillary industries that any new startup would support would necessarily be a key criteria for an investor, or at least for the panel that I represent, to look at in terms of how would I evaluate a startup and how would I see whether only an established player who's already got a seed A or seed B funding into the business, would I pump more money behind him, or would I pump money behind a startup who has a fabulous drawing board and has potential to bring in revenue through multiple sectors? So if that were to be a choice that I would make, I would necessarily put a little money to see whether the proof of concept comes out, whether the actual gaming experience, which is the UX of the game or the body of the game as we call it, is invigorating enough for somebody to invest. And if all these boxes are ticked, then I think any startup would find investors. The fundamentals across VC circuit throughout the world remains the same. It's not necessarily the passion that drives investors. Investors were wooed by passion and by enthusiastic Gen X newbies in early 2005, 2010. Today, it's about dollar. if your activity, irrespective of what space you are in, if your activity has the potential to generate dollars, if it has a potential to create a social evolution, if it has your potential to reach out to millions, then there are millions who are sitting with millions of dollars to pump into the business. And that's my take on this business, and that continues to be the benchmark.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Karthik, for those insights. I mean, this is definitely a very positive insights for those startups who are struggling to or have a fantastic product but still have not raised funds. But please don't lose hope or don't hibernate. Okay, that brings to my next question to Maraj. So Maraj, you represent a PR agency and you obviously do a lot of marketing. So what are the new products you've seen in the space? Because you work with so many startup founders, so many companies. What are the new emerging products that you've seen in the last 4 or 5 months?
If you talk about the gaming entertainment business,
yeah,
overall, well, I'm not seeing products. I see events. I see happenings. I see online strategies for gaming industry. A lot of investments being done in creating competitions worldwide, World Cups in different kinds of leagues. Like I said before, eSports is growing into becoming a real sport where you have pro gamers making millions of dollars. Advertisers are pumping money into these events. And we see more and more of that. My son, who's playing these games, he's participating in World Cups online. You can see it anywhere in the world. And you have big companies who are investing money into these World Cups and leagues. So these are the things which has grown a lot in the past few months, which we see. And we have been contacted by a couple of these pro gamers who want us to help them grow their fan base, their sponsorship by helping them gaining more fans with our reputation building strategies. So we see a lot of that side. When it comes to other things, when it comes to esports, maybe the other people can answer that also.
Okay, great. Good to know. I know children they just picked up the gaming space, and I agree to that. Thank you, Miraj.
I would add to Miraj's point on this. What Premier League did to Messi and Ronaldo is what we're going to see in the next 5-7 years in the pro sport or the e-sport game. Today, PUBG has already become a household name. Any business gets adopted at a very primary stage with a few takers, which is where your large-scale players would come into existence. But then, with the kind of internet connectivity we have, it has a potential to explode socially across the ecosystem. Today, PUBG manufactures more than 700 different artifacts and products or merchandise available in 128 countries with a followership of 600 million, which means practically 1 out of every 7 or 8 people on this planet plays PUBG either once or has been addicted to PUBG. I have people in my family who play PUBG for 4-5 hours every day. So I believe with that level of accessibility that the gaming industry has had, I think it's only likely to become a community engagement very soon, where people, while talking about a Liverpool game, might also go to a bar to watch a pro PUBG tournament as well. And I don't see that being too distant.
I agree. And that's what happening. My son plays Fortnite. It's also a huge game.
Yeah.
And 350 million people play that worldwide. That World Cup last year, where the prize money was $100 million. And they have these online tournaments every week where people win money. And so there are millions of followers who watch these games live. So there is an audience, and you can see more and more people are doing that now, especially when it comes to these pandemic times, because people sitting at home, that's all they do, especially the young people, and they are the future.
Great. Good to know about these insights. Okay, I'd like to ask this question to Jennifer. Jennifer, what do you see new emerging products in the space?
I think there's a huge gaming community in the GCC, about 300 million. But I think one of the problems is that the current games that are around are developed by international companies, and they lack local content relevant to the local communities. And of recent times, there have been two companies that have been developing their own local content. One of them is Falafel Games, and the other one is Tamamim Games. They are doing that. But overall, I don't know any products that have been developed. In terms of generally startups, tech startups looking for funding, there's one of the companies that we teamed up with to look for investment that has developed an online platform whereby it's called Instaball. It got showcased on Arabian Business recently, whereby the startups can just subscribe to a platform and they've got everything in one place. They can get connected with the investment or investment companies in one place. But as I said before, a lot of the tech startups are still in lockdown mode or got their head buried in the sand. And we had a presentation and very few showed up, which is very unfortunate. But in terms of esports, other than what I've said, I'm not aware of any new products that are being developed, and it's a shame because it's an untapped area of opportunity, tremendous opportunity.
Wow, I think it's a shame that they didn't show up, for the event. I mean, they should have. I mean, if you are watching this session, please listen to Jennifer. She's not very happy at all. I mean, same here. I mean, you shouldn't be like disappearing. I mean, COVID-19 has hit us. I mean, everybody is trying to stay alive and do something. This is the right time. Crisis always have opportunities, right? So please,
Yes, indeed.
Please show up on these events. Thank you, Jennifer. Somakshnand.
So yeah, I mean, emerging trends. What I am kind of excited about is basically face tracking and hand gestures.
Come a little closer. Yeah, sorry.
No worries. So emerging trends. What I'm excited about is definitely what Intel is working on. That is tracking your face. Now, how that works is Intel is planning to track every muscle or every twitch of your face, which could help them analyze your sentiment. Now, for a long time, the grudge of parents and I think teachers in general are that games are addictive, and over being addictive, they're stressful, right? So if someone is addicted and stressed, it could really shoot up stress levels. So what Intel has done is trying to scan your sentiment, and if you seem very pissed off or if you seem irritated, it reduces your difficulty level real time. So that's something I'm excited to see how it works. I'm excited to see hand gesture again done by Intel, where you could just point. Now, if I point like this, no one is backing off now, right? But yeah, after the technology comes, maybe once it's adopted, I could just use this gesture to in a shooting game, or and it would help scan my fingers. It's already reality, but I mean, Xbox had a tryst with this. Intel's doing it in a big way. Also, I think Stadia is a great is a great concept that has emerged. It's something which has already it's launched in the US and Canada. So I mean, this is a Stadia controller, right? So what Stadia is trying to do is it's trying to disrupt the space. Until now, Xbox and PlayStation have been dominating it via a console, but Stadia is trying to get rid of the console, play the game on the cloud. Now, obviously, there are going to be challenges, because Xbox and PlayStation have their own communities which have been nurtured over the years. Stadia right now, I can't find online players, so that's a warning sign. But the way there is very less entry barrier, like for someone to maybe join a PlayStation ecosystem, they need to buy a $800 console and accessories, right? Like the PlayStation 5, I think, is going to be priced at that. Whereas Stadia, you just need to pay probably just for the controller and $11 subscription. So I'm definitely thinking that this is the emerging space. Startups may not feel demoralized. I would again kind of insist upon passion being very important, because I think for an early stage investor, we have seen even ventures with the strategic direction of Google, for example, like fail. but what is needed is the drive in the team to be able to keep pivoting. Now, I do agree that my propensity to invest in a startup with a prototype, some kind of traction would be higher because you're gambling with less uncertainties. But if as the fellow panelist said, if the risk reward of an early stage investment warrants early stage investment, and if that is, if we have some real rock stars who are planning to keep trying to make things happen, things will happen. There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Of course, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. I would like to see that Intel coming up with that game where the facial gestures will determine the variety of the game. I mean, where the game is moving to. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm already like fascinated by the idea.
I wish I had that before. My mom would have been more comfortable with me gaming for hours. But now anyway, work has taken over, so I don't game maybe once a while, but I wish I had that before. Yeah.
Oh yes. Thanks to COVID-19. And also about, I think Netflix disrupted Blockbuster, the DVD industry. I think the cloud-based gaming company that you mentioned, who knows, we're going to poach all those you name it, Microsoft and Sony players. Who knows? Thank you, Amar. I remember you mentioned about a pivot a startup did from a hospitality industry to another space. Can you tell us what the pivot was? Can you explain? I couldn't get it very clearly.
Sure. So the startup is basically it's called Hotel Data Cloud. So they're basically providing data services for the hospitality industry, and with that, basically provide a standardized data model for all hospital industries to distribute their metadata across all the platforms. So basically, if you are booking then through Booking.com or Expedia, normally, basically, hotels would have to enter those data in every platform, and you currently have over 3,000 sales channels. So what they do is basically they have one standardized data model where hotels would basically put their data in, including all the multimedia, including all the descriptions in terms of the hotels, the facilities, etc. And then that basically will be automatically distributed in a standardized manner across all the sales channels. Now, what happens through COVID-19, obviously the overall industry had been hit very hard, but it was also a key importance basically to provide information for the hotels and for the consumers about what measures, sanitary measures, basically hotels have taken in order to protect the safety of the hotel guests when they come in. So basically what COVID-19 social distancing procedures have been implemented, what sanitary approach has been set, are there basically compliance with regulations in the countries related to COVID-19 reopening. And so the company was able to very quickly expand their data model to include those data fields, so that basically then consumers had much better transparency about how well is basically the hotel now prepared for reopening. Basically, do I feel now more secure to basically book at that hotel versus another hotels because I know they have taken the right measurements. And so with that model, they were now able basically to have a much stronger sales points towards the hoteliers themselves, but also with regulators, because they were very much interested to basically enforce that aspect. And now basically a lot of tourism as well as healthcare regulatory organizations are supporting the adoption of that data models in their countries, because they are interested that basically there's a standardized information, as well as basically they also receive a standardized feedback in terms of how well basically the hotels are prepared. So again, I think that's why I said it's even in that critical industry, which has been hardest affected by COVID-19, there's basically opportunities to capture.
Absolutely stunned. Like anybody who is watching us tonight in the space, please get to know these tricks to pivot, even though the industry has been badly hit. Thank you, Amar. Okay, I've got a very
Okay.
interesting question. Thank you. I'll ask Karthik. What do you recommend? What are the recommended options to fundraise? Because as you know, at Latoken, we connect investors and startups through, on one platform. So what are your recommendations for, to those startups who are looking to fundraise?
How unique and how different is your idea? That's one. Second is, what's your skin in the game? So for example, there's a very interesting e-game that Google is developing. It's in, I would say, it's in a pre-beta state. And if somebody has, so we started this industry with a first person shooting. We went into arcade, we went into motorsports, we went into reality soccer, reality cricket. But what Google has started working on is what we call as a virtual life project, which means 22 years ago, a game called SimCity, Electronic Arts developed a game called SimCity, which was about building a virtual city and you becoming a mayor with a control in your hands and trying to manage an entire city. Now, what Google understood is that in every day, every normal human being spends around 45 to 60 minutes of his time, which is non-professional, non-personal, non-productive time on the digital space. And every human being has a certain amount of guilt about I should have done this thing right in my life to make sure that things work better. Google is tapping onto these two insights to work on a e-evolution game, which is mapping your entire real life into a virtual life. So you might be a citizen of a particular city, somebody might be a police officer in a particular city, somebody might be a lawyer in a particular city, you might be a broadcaster in a virtual city, and that builds an entire ecosystem and you play a virtual life game. Which the advantage of something like this is it brings about millions of people on one platform. It creates a satisfaction of doing something right and it creates massive revenues. Now that to me is a clutter breaking idea. So if you are a startup and if you have an idea which is different from a first person shooting, an arcade, or a reality sport idea, yes, there's going to be enough opportunities for you. B, how evolved your technology is. If you're just going to cut, copy, and paste a technological platform that's already been exploited, then you need to go back to the original idea of friends and family funding, spouse funding, show me a proof of concept, show me how the game works in a beta mode, and then I would put money. See, more importantly, how's your revenue stream defined? Because a gaming enthusiast, and that there's a difference between a gaming geek, and that's exactly what happens in every tech space. There is a geek and then there's a businessman. You need to marry both aspects of the business to make sure that as a venture fund, I evaluate you right. You might have the best possible idea, but if you create a closed loop gaming experience, and if you create a difficulty level that 2 out of every 2,000 people or 1 out of 1,000 people would succeed, you might have created the best and the most difficult game to play on this planet, but there would be very few takers, and hence I would get no ad revenue, I would get no subscription revenue. How bandwidth light and how space light my game is going to be. That's one. Second, more important is it's not just about my ancillary revenue. Like I said, it's not just about the industry revenue. It's also about repeats. What's the level of fatigue that your game is going to get into? Formula One, despite being one of the oldest motorsports, still manages an edge. Soccer, primarily because of the money that soccer continues to invest into the business, manages its edge. Wrestling, World Wrestling Association for years has been investing heavily. So is your game going to go through a level of fatigue? And if you're going to go through a level of fatigue, there are big boys with billions of dollars like PUBG who would disrupt the market and take you for a ride. So how unique your idea is, what's your revenue stream, what's the level of fatigue, and what's the level of evolution that your game has? Are you going to prepare one game, a box console or a live streaming console and leave it at that? Or are you going to continuously upgrade the game to a level that a user never feels complete, or the user journey never feels complete, and it continues to evolve? If you have some of these elements right, if you have a strong corporate structure, governance, the regular bells and whistles of a VC funding space, then as an investor, anybody would be interested in a startup.
Right.
But this typically is, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody, but this typically is not a space where I have drawn a game on a piece of paper or I've written an idea on a piece of paper, because the beauty lies in from the paper to my hand phone, that entire journey, how strong and how widely built you are for this journey is what is going to define your funding.
Okay. I mean, thoroughly agree with you, Karthik. I mean, very good points. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Jennifer, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, I would. Some of the alternatives that the founders could think about is forming strategic partnerships, for example, having business partners in different countries that could take their concept to that country, because perhaps they have the influence and they have the connections rather than trying to hold on to their concept all to themselves. Because what we experience is typically a lot of founders would like to get investment into their businesses, but they don't want the investor involved in the operational side of things. So that is one aspect. They need to be open-minded to that. And that is something that myself and my business partners who are investment bankers had plans for the startups that we were supporting. We were going to take them not just we were going to help them find funding to operate in the UAE, but we're going to take them to other countries such as Brazil and other countries that they haven't thought about, because we knew strategic partners that they could form alliances who had businesses similar to theirs, but did not necessarily have their concept. The other thing that I feel, the founders should look into as well, which if they could get such offers would be great, is a complete buyout. We had two of our investors who were willing to buy out the whole, the whole business, the whole startup business, and perhaps have the founders as consultants, because they still have the idea, but the investor has the funding, and instead of investing whereby they feel they're going to be risking their money, they prefer to just buy them out, which is a good option too. And the offers that these founders were getting were in millions of dollars, actually. And then, of course, you had COVID and everything went quiet. So those are that's my advice to some of the founders: be open-minded. Not just confine yourself to thinking about, I want funded into my company, but there are other options available as well of scaling your business.
Yeah, I agree to the strategic partnership model, because I see a lot of potential there, especially if you are from a particular region and you want to have access to another region, and you have offerings which complement both of you, so obviously it does make sense to have that. That's a very good point. But because you brought up this buyout point, I just want to know how many startups would be really looking to be bought out, because if they are in that space where they are really known, popular, they have got the community, they have got the user base, they've got the name. So what would be the incentive for them? I mean, besides the money, obviously you have to think it's about your branding. It's about you as an entity who would like to sustain. You're doing good. It's between the two things. So, have you come across a situation where startup was struggling to make up their mind? Because it's a very emotional moment to let go of your baby, right?
Yes, we did. With one of our clients from Malaysia, his concept was in the automotive industry. He was struggling. He had an investor here in Dubai, and I was willing to pay 15 million for his business, but he struggled with it. He was divided whether he should accept it, because he's a young guy and 15 million seems like a good a lot of money, and he could just take it, give up the idea, and go and start something else. But they do struggle with it, and yes. But I think now that we're in COVID, and for the tech startups, it's so difficult now. It's more challenging now to find funding. Perhaps some of them would be open to the idea of having 15 million in the bank. But it's a struggle, yes, because it's your baby, it's your concept. You developed it and you want to stay with it, and you want to make that 15 million. You don't want to just take somebody's money and then your baby just disappears overnight. Yes, I agree with you.
Thank you.
To just add to Jennifer, sorry to butt in, I see a lot of startups in this space, especially in the tech space and in the geek tech space, as I say, because it's also about the mindset of the people. If you are a tech entrepreneur or if you are a tech geek, you would, by the time you've conceptualized and built one game, you would have already reached into your game number 2, game number 3, game number 4 in your mind, and that would be on your drawing board. And if you are a tech geek, it doesn't necessarily mean that you might have all the bells and whistles of getting your marketing right, getting your partnerships right, getting your global alliances, getting your reach, getting your socials, getting subscription models right. So instead of you trying to build multiple avenues of doing all these things, you might as well pass it on to a larger boy who's willing to buy that business out of you at an idea or at a product stage, and then grow money and give you either a revenue share model. A revenue share model in the tech space is fast evolving. What we call as a royalty in the book industry is fast evolving. So if I've created a game, somebody would buy that game out from me and would continue to give me a percentage of the revenue. That continues to be, because if I'm a game builder, my core competency lies in building technology. My core competency might not lie in having global build-up or a global expansion. So I would be happy to take 15, 20 million, spend 5 million out of that into creating a team that builds another round of another game, sell it out again at 15, 20 million, and continue building games. So it depends on what kind of a setup or what kind of a startup are you. But yes, we see that often.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I obviously didn't think through that. If you are, yes, letting go of your first baby, then obviously you're building on your second, right? And third. Thank you. Yeah, you can think that way as well.
What serial startups are. That's what serial startup entrepreneurs are. They love building businesses. They might not be good at growing businesses.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karthik. Thank you. So obviously you just have 1 more minute to go. I would like to take some closing remarks from you, Maraj. This is your first time. I would love to have you for next session, but I'd like to know your remarks, closing remarks for the session and the evening and the end of the week and end of the month. Maraj, your closing remarks for the session tonight.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you call my name. Well, I was listening to Mr. Karthik talking about the gaming, what people need to think about when they create games. And I would just like to add something to that quickly. And I agree with him on every point. And you have to find a concept of building the game where the player feels in control of the game, and it constantly makes him want to come back. It's an evolving game, like all the big games which are in the market now. They found a way to engage the gamers to come back, like PUBG, Fortnite, or Minecraft. So that's what I wanted to add to his. Other than that, I have nothing more to say. I was very interesting session. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Maraj. Thank you. Somakshanan, would like to take some of your closing remarks for this for tonight.
Very interesting session, and thanks for sharing this. Very interesting, and thanks, Sony, for organizing and spearheading this one. So just for me, a takeaway would be to draw parallel with another interesting industry as a leaving thought. Since the past 3 decades, there's only probably 2 industries that have experienced real inelasticity of price. That means the price of the good or the commodity has not changed. Now, why does that happen? That's because of the addiction or the loss or having no choice of any other substitute. Right now, obviously, the first industry that has seen this kind of inelasticity is narcotics. Therefore, it has a lot of profits, and therefore Netflix is now analyzing what is the business dynamics behind narcotics. And the second industry is gaming, where even since 30 years, a game cassette was about $35, and now it's in the same neighborhood. So I think that tells a lot about gaming and what kind of profits are there to be exploited. So obviously, yeah, there's also a lot of challenges because that's the kind of industry it is.
Great. That was a great comparison, by the way. Thank you. Thanks for that. Amar, your closing remarks for the session.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here. Maybe I just wanted to build up on Jennifer's and Katrik's points, which I think it's important to reiterate that there are 2 competencies in creating babies and raising babies. And I think basically founders should basically be aware of where their competency lies. And especially basically if you're, let's say, a baby creator, you can actually build your reputation and particularly at that point, and you might basically better off than basically just focusing on raising. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, and they might not necessarily have the competency. So I think it's important for startups inventors basically to identify where's their competency, and if they basically can just create this an idea, push it basically to a pilot stage where it's basically commercialized, and then basically find the right investors to move on. That's probably a better productive time for them than trying to push every idea to the full market utilization where they will not really have a chance.
Absolutely agree to those points, as Karthik rightly also mentioned. Thank you, Amar, for those closing remarks. Jennifer, what would be your closing remarks for the session tonight?
I'll say to all startups, try and stay positive because the best and most successful companies grew out of the last global crisis. Stay positive and pivot. There are lots of opportunities out there, but unless you're positive, you're not going to see them. And this is good a time to get a business coach because you can't do it on your own. We never used to have business coaches, but now we have one because your business coaches will enable you to pivot and restructure whatever you're doing or whatever your business is in order to take advantage of the opportunities out there and create value as well as make a lot of money. It's possible even with a pandemic.
Absolutely.
So stay positive, get a business coach, take advantage of opportunities. There are lots out there.
Yes, absolutely agree. I mean, obviously you like to pivot, but you don't know. You don't know how to pivot, where to pivot to. So business coach, absolutely thumbs up. Thank you, Jennifer. Karthik, what
for inviting me.
What would be your closing remarks for the session tonight?
Very simple. The game's just begun. We have a long way to go in this space. Everybody needs to be as disruptive as they can be. And if they're disruptive, they show technology. That's about it. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for your taking your time out on a Friday evening for me, because I'm based in Singapore, and especially this is a national public holiday as well, considering we have a festival. Thank you so much for your time for this session, committing the session. I look forward to have you on more of our sessions, which we conduct Monday to Friday. You can check us out on the different formats we have at our website, which is www.latoken.com/events. And please feel free to reach out to me if anything is of your interest. Thank you again. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend, and stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.